Today we're talking about what £1 could actually buy you in 1971 Britain. Your granddad walks into a pub in 1971 with a single £1. He has 6 pints, gets fish and chips on the way home, and still has change left over. That's not a story. That's actual documented fact. And by the end of this video, you're going to be properly angry about what happened to your money. Right, let's start with something properly British, the pub, and a chippy tea, because this is where the numbers get absolutely mental. In 1971, a pint of bitter cost you 15 pence, 15, which means your £1 could get you 6.5 pints, 6 proper pints, and still have change rattling in your pocket. Today, that same pint will cost you anywhere between £5 and £7.50, depending on where you are. In London, you're looking at closer to £7 for anything decent. But here's where it gets better. After those pints, you'd fancy some food, yeah? Fish and chips cost 20 pence in 1971. 20 pence for a full portion fish, chips, the lot. Your £1 could buy you 5 fish and chip suppers. Today, you're paying nearly a tenner for the same thing. That's a 4,850% increase over 54 years. So let me paint you the full picture here. In 1971, you could genuinely walk into a pub with a single £1, have 3 pints, walk down to the chippy, get yourself a proper meal, and still have 35p left over. That's a full evening out drinking and eating for less than what a bag of crisps costs you today. Why does this matter? Because when your grandparents talk about going out for pennies, they're not being dramatic. Social life wasn't this massive financial calculation. You didn't need to check your bank balance before meeting your mates. The pub was affordable everyday life, not a weekend luxury you had to budget for. That's massive, but wait till you see what happened to transport. This is the one that'll properly wind you up. Because transport in 1971? Completely different universe. Let's start with petrol. A gallon of petrol, not a litre. A full gallon cost 34 pence in June 1971. Your £1 could buy you 3 gallons, which would take you roughly 90 to 120 miles depending on your motor. That's London to Birmingham and back. For a quid. Today, a gallon works out to about £5.89. So that same journey now costs you nearly 18 quid in petrol alone. That's an increase of over 1,600%. And that's before you factor in congestion charges, parking fees, and all the other bits that didn't exist in 71. But say you didn't drive. Bus travel? Even better. A single bus fare cost around 5 pence in 1971. 5 pence. Your £1 could buy you 20 bus journeys, 20 separate trips across town. Today, in the West Midlands, a single journey costs £2.20. In rural areas, you're looking at 3 quid. So your £1 today gets you half a journey. You'd need to find another quid just to get home. Here's a proper example. Back in 1971, you could take 4 kids on the bus to the cinema, 2p each way, so 16p total for transport. The cinema tickets for all 4 kids? 60p. Throw in 24p for sweets to share, and you've spent exactly £1 for a full Saturday morning outing for 4 children. Today, that same trip, bus fares, cinema tickets, and snacks would cost you nearly 25 quid. 25 quid for what used to cost 1. And trains? A day return from London Waterloo to Farnborough, 51 miles, cost exactly £1 in 1971. Today, that same journey is £22.50 standard fare. You can get it cheaper if you book online, maybe 15 quid, but you're still looking at 15 times the cost. Why does this matter beyond just moaning about prices? Because mobility determined your entire quality of life. In 1971, living outside the city centre and commuting in was genuinely affordable. You could visit family in other cities without saving up for weeks. You could take a spontaneous day trip without checking 3 different booking sites for deals. Transport was infrastructure, not a luxury expense that required strategic planning. And that freedom? That's what we've lost. It's not just about the money, it's about the choices transport costs force you to make or not make. Alright, that's depressing enough, but here's where your food shop went. Right, let's talk about feeding yourself, because your weekly shop in 1971 versus today tells you everything about how living costs have shifted. A loaf of bread cost 9 pence in 1971. Your pound could buy you 11 loaves. 11. Today, you're paying about £1.45 for a standard loaf, so you're not even getting one full loaf for what used to buy you nearly a dozen. Milk? 5 pence for a pint. You could get 20 pints of milk for your quid. Today, a pint averages 59p, which works out to a 555% increase. And here's where it gets weird. A 4-pinter today, which is actually 2 litres, so slightly less, costs about £1.80. If it had tracked with pure inflation, it should cost over 10 quid. It doesn't, because supermarkets use milk as a loss leader to get you through the door. They're literally losing money on it to make you buy other stuff. Eggs? A dozen large eggs cost 25p in 1971. Your pound could get you 4 dozen eggs. Try buying 4 dozen eggs today without spending at least 15 quid, especially if you're going free range or organic. Butter half a pound for 11.5p. You could get 9 packs for £1. Today, that'll cost you £1.30 for the same amount. Coffee in 8-ounce jar was 50p. You could get 2 jars for your quid. Today, a 200-gram jar, which is less than 8 ounces, costs £5.50. That's an absolute piss take when you actually compare the weight. Here's what this means in practice. A basic weekly shop for a family in 1971: bread, milk, eggs, butter. Some veg might cost you 3 to 5 quid total. You could feed a household on one person's daily wages. Today, that same shop easily hits 80 to 100 quid, and that's if you're being careful. You're spending multiple days' worth of work just to cover the basics. Why does this matter? Because food inflation hasn't been equal. Luxury items, electronics, some clothing have actually gotten cheaper relative to wages. But the stuff you need every single week, that's where you're being squeezed. You can't choose not to eat. You can't substitute your way out of it. And that's why the cost of living crisis hits so hard. It's not about luxuries, it's about basics. That squeeze is real, but nothing compares to what happened with small everyday things. This is where it gets properly mental, because we're talking about the tiny purchases that used to mean nothing, but now make you think twice. Chocolate bars. A Mars bar cost 2 pence in 1971. 2 pence. Your pound could buy you 50 Mars bars. Today, you're paying 89p for one. And here's the kicker, it's actually smaller. The 71 Mars bar was 57 grams. Today's is 50 grams. So you're paying 4,350% more for less chocolate. Crisps? A full-size bag of Golden Wonder crisps, not these tiny multi-packs, cost 3p. Your pound bought you 30 full bags. Today, a single bag costs over a quid. That's a 3,300% increase. Cigarettes, and I'm not promoting smoking, just showing the numbers, cost 27p for a pack in 1971, just under 4 packs for your quid. Today, 14 quid for a single pack. That's a 5,085% increase. The government's hammered tobacco with sin taxes, which is policy, not just inflation. But it shows you how certain products have been deliberately priced out of casual affordability. Postage stamps. You could post 56 first-class letters for £1 in 1971 because a stamp cost 3p. Today, a single first-class stamp is £1.70. You can't even post one letter for what used to post 56. Here's one that'll make you laugh. potato fritters, or scallops depending on where you're from. They cost 1 penny in 1971. 1 penny. Your pound could get you 100 of them. Today, you're paying 80p each, and you can practically see through them because they're so thin. Why does this section matter? Because these are the things you don't budget for, the grab a snack, send a card, treat yourself moments. In 1971, these purchases were genuinely thoughtless. You didn't calculate. You didn't budget. They were too cheap to matter. Today, every single one of these decisions is a micro-financial choice. Buy chocolate or save the quid. Post the card or send a text. That psychological shift from abundance to scarcity thinking changes how you live your daily life. And it's exhausting. Alright, those are consumer goods, but here's the big one that breaks everything. So what actually happened between 1971 and now? Because these aren't random numbers, there are 3 specific structural changes that broke the system. First, decimalisation itself. February 1971, Britain switched from pounds, shillings and pence to decimal pounds and new pence. Sounds simple, but it created chaos. Shop owners rounded up prices during conversion. What was 2 shillings and 6 pence, worth about 12.5p, suddenly became 15p or even 20p, for simplicity. Customers lost track of true values during the switch, and businesses took advantage. Inflation jumped. Second, Britain came off the Bretton Woods system in 1971, the international agreement that kept currency values stable and inflation controlled. Once that ended, the pound's value became market-driven. By 1975, inflation hit 24%. Your money lost a quarter of its value in 1 year. Wages couldn't keep up. Savings got decimated. Third, and this is the big one, taxation policy shifted. Look at the increases. General inflation averaged about 1,600% between 1971 and 2023. But petrol, tobacco, alcohol, those increases range from 4,000 to 5,000%. That's not inflation, that's targeted taxation. The government discovered they could raise revenue by hammering specific goods with duties, and they never stopped. Here's what this means practically. Your pound in 1971 wasn't living in some fantasy economy. It was backed by controlled inflation, reasonable taxation, and wages that roughly matched productivity. We systematically dismantled that structure over 50 years. And the result? A pound that used to buy you 6 pints, 5 fish suppers, and 20 bus journeys now gets you maybe a chocolate bar if you're lucky. Right, so your 1971 pound bought 6 pints, 5 fish and chip suppers, 20 bus rides, or 50 Mars bars. Today's pound gets you, basically, nothing useful. That's not nostalgia, that's structural economic change over 54 years. The numbers are real, the sources are linked below, and yeah, you should probably be a bit angry about this. Cheers for watching.